All right, it is 11:30 and some people are still joining us. Sonia, if you see others in the waiting room, if you want to admit them, I think at this point I've admitted all of them. So welcome to Basic Budgeting, everybody. And we're going to go ahead and start. So thank you all so much for taking this time this afternoon out of your day to be part of the Work Like a Laker conference as we discuss basic budgeting with Ben Rhodes from MoneySmart Lakers. So thank you so much, Ben, for being with us this afternoon. As we begin, if you are in a space, Ben, if you could just go to the next slide.
Maybe.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. If you are in a space that you're able to share your video, please do so. We would appreciate that level of engagement this afternoon. This is a great way to meet others on campus and within our community. And if you can, please keep your sound muted and use the chat box and the raise hand feature if you have any questions during the presentation. Remember, this information is for all of you, so all questions are welcome. And on behalf of the university, please know that all the attendees must comply with the Zoom acceptable use policy and that this session is being recorded and may be posted on the Career Center website. If you haven't already, please take a moment to check in using the link in the chat box. I will add that momentarily. If you haven't had an opportunity, this will enter you into a chance to win one of our tech accessory prizes. Thanks to our prize sponsor, Consolidated Electrical Distributors. So please take a moment to go ahead and check in. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. And we're going to go ahead and turn this over to Ben as he shares with us the basic budgeting and all these things MoneySmart Lakers can use for their financial wellness.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody for being here. Let me quick introduce myself. My name is Ben Rhodes. I work in the financial aid office here at Grand Valley, and I guess technically what I do is supervise the customer service piece of it. So if you've ever, called in to, for one reason or another, to the office to maybe ask about loans or ask about financial aid or FAFSA or anything else like that, then more than likely you talk to somebody on my team or possibly me as well. One of the other things I do is I supervise the MoneySmart Lakers program. And really what we're doing here is trying to make sure that students have access to I guess you would say financial literacy, to understand financial independence. Obviously you guys, you'll be attending Grand Valley, you'll be getting a degree, and then you're going to be graduating. One of the pieces that maybe the soft skills that you don't receive as much information about is that personal finance piece. You don't want to graduate the university and then, have this loan debt to repay for a lot of you. You find a job, not understand how to balance your finances, how to pay debt versus, pay early on debt, try to get that done with, or save up for an emergency savings plan, or other practical tips like that. And so that's what we're here for. We have a lot of individual appointments. So even right now, I think we have 4 or 5 individual appointments going on today over the next few hours through our program that other people are doing. And so if you ever want to have one of those personal appointments, you can just go to our website and register. The information that we cover typically is going to be somewhat on this slide. So, I think this afternoon we're sitting down with a student and actually going to create like a weekly, monthly budget plan for her. Go through her individual finances, like what she's making right now, which is, it's small. She's got one job that she works 20 hours at or so, and then sit down with her and create a budget plan to help her, as much as possible with that kind of stuff. So we do a little bit of credit information. If you don't know, as a college student, especially if you're borrowing loans, you are creating a credit, I guess a credit history of sorts. And so we do some credit counseling as well. It's a good chunk of students that are using credit cards, whether that's through your parents, maybe have a credit card that they're allowing you to use a certain, 80 bucks a month or 150 bucks a month, or you just have your own that you're trying to balance. And so we do talk a little bit about that as well, and give you some advice on that. We are starting to get into wealth building. I think that's an area that we need to grow in, especially with all the interest level in investments right now going on with even college students. Obviously, if you invest early, that can be a big help in terms of making sure that you have some additional funding, kind of a side piece. And then of course we do all the financial aid, exit loan counseling stuff. So if you have borrowed loan, you receive a message sometime a couple months before you graduate saying like, hey, you want to sign up for one of these appointments so you can learn a little bit more about, repaying that loan that you will have to do in a few months. And so that's probably our biggest appointment, and what we hear from most with students is trying to make sure they can manage that repayment of the loan. So yeah. Today, though, I'm going to talk a little bit about really budgeting, spending, and managing those spending options, because I think as a college student, that tends to be a little bit more practical. We have students who are just in their freshman, sophomore year joining us, and you're not going to be repaying loans in 2 months. But you will probably, whether that's from a stimulus or a CARES Act or your own funding, maybe it's a tax return, you might be getting a influx of money soon. You might just automatically get influxes of money through your paycheck every couple weeks. And so you have this, you have the money that you're making, whether that's through a job or other resources that you have. And then you have the money that you're spending. And I think for any college student, that's going to be applicable. And so that's why we're going to go over that a little bit today. I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about why we're doing it, why we think it's important for students to start at least having these conversations. And that really has to do with your goals financially. As a college student, I know you may not have a ton of access to finances right now, like a ton of wealth. Our average college student is making less than $6,000 a year. And so sure, you might not be in that category. We have a handful that make 10, 15, 18 grand because you work full-time or a lot and you try to balance school with that, but that shouldn't be your primary focus. I mean, you guys are college students right now and you should be getting those good grades, should be focusing on graduating as quick as you can, not withdrawing from classes and saving that money. I'm not going to really talk about that, but that's a big way to save money as a side note. Just this morning, I talked to a student who withdrew from 2 other courses already this semester. And I looked at her history, her withdrawal, fail history, and she had a total of 22 credits that she had withdrawn from in the last, I don't know how long that was, maybe somewhere around 3 years because she was a junior. So there are practical ways as a college student to do that, because 22 credits is going to cost her somewhere around $14,000. So that's a full year of tuition that she just kind of wasted. And that's not uncommon. I honestly know there's a handful of people joining us today. I would probably bet my guess that just the way the percentage goes is that everyone in this room has withdrawn from one course. That is about our percentage of students. It's about 80%. So it's easy to kind of guess that. If you haven't, that's great. You've saved money, but that's just a little side tip. And that's just some of the information that we talk about because you have these financial goals. I don't know if that's to graduate with as little loan debt as possible. Maybe it's a little bit more short-term goals. So it's to buy a car this summer. Or to repay back some debt that you currently have. Maybe financial goals are you want to become independent or you want to start investing. And so you want to save up, $500 or $600. Maybe technically, I think last week was spring break or this week for some of you who are, so maybe it's you want a trip soon at some point. I know the university is suggesting you don't do that, but, maybe this summer you are planning on traveling, or you want to save up for a study abroad with Grand Valley or things like that. So there's all these financial goals that you might have. Without budgeting, it may not be possible. And so that's why we feel like this is a topic that every college student should really be talking about, or at least have some basic understanding about. We will talk about needs versus wants a little bit different, because really why we're starting this is financial goals. Hopefully, as a college student at Grand Valley, your financial goals aren't to fulfill your needs. You know, hopefully right now you have clothing, food, shelter, and your health needs, your near needs, your health needs. If you don't have that, there are resources at Grand Valley that we can plug you into to get those needs. Really what we're talking about is we're talking about budgeting to be able to do your wants, whether that's trips or that's books you want to buy, or that's a car you need to buy, things like that, the wants. And so that's why it's important to do that. Then we'll talk about the actual spending plan itself. So that's kind of what we're going to be going over and why. But the first reason you have this spending plan, your financial goals, getting away from your goals, is it's because it's a choice. I personally have had this experience, and I would have to bet again that most of you have had the experience where you live, at least for one paycheck to paycheck, you're living paycheck to paycheck for a month. It might be a couple months. You might feel that pressure every single month. You might be like, I'm a college student, I'm doing that every single month. Like, I work paycheck, I work and I live paycheck to paycheck. This month paycheck goes to rent, this paycheck goes to food and whatever else you have. So that's not uncommon to have that pressure or anxiety about the paycheck to paycheck thing. In fact, that's a lot of adults. It's in America. If you look at the amount of adults that are saving, it's very few percent of adults that are actually saving. A good way to see that is the number of adults that have an emergency plan. So have saved enough that they have several months or 3 months. Typically, it's suggested 3 to 5 months of your salary. And here in America, that's going to be less than 20% of adults. So that have that in the savings account. And so it's not uncommon for people to not have these conversations, but that is the main reason we want you to start having it, is because it's choice. It's your money. You've now worked hard for it, or you've gotten whatever funds you have, however you've gotten it. And we want you to be able to choose how you use that. Now, for about 80% of our students, a little over 80% of the students, when you graduate, the piece that you won't have a choice about is the loans. That is a little over 80% of the Grand Valley students are borrowing loans. And so you won't really have a choice. You will have to pay that back. I talked very briefly, I'll talk a little bit more, but needs. You don't really have a choice about shelter or food. You need those things. But there are going to be funds that you have above and beyond your needs, hopefully your basic needs, that you'll be able to choose where they go. Lisa and I were just talking a little bit about it. I travel. That is my thing, I guess. It used to be concerts before COVID, and now there's no concerts. So now it's all about travel. So I travel once a month at least. And that's me saying that I want that, and I'm choosing to save my money and not spend on other things because this is important to me. And so it's the same thing with you, whether that's books, whether it's a car, whether it's other things. We want your money to go where you want to use it. So reduce surprises too. If you have a spending plan, you typically will start saving. That is that 20% of adults in America, is people who budget, people who have spending plans, people who get in the habits I talk about today are the ones that have the choice, but also have the freedom of reducing, of having that anxiety about, living paycheck to paycheck. Right now in America, the typical reasons why people suffer from depression or anxiety tend to be, as adults, tend to be like relationship issues, kids, and finances. Those are the main 3 reasons. Of course, there's a lot of others. There's career, there's family, more like parents or other extended family. There are other reasons why people have depression or anxiety, but those tend to be at the top, and finances tends to be one of the top ones. Again, this idea about living paycheck to paycheck, that's stressful. Am I going to be able to pay rent this month, or buy groceries, or it's summer and I have no shorts, and so I will be sweating all summer. Like those kind of choices, if you have financial independence, if you understand budgeting, then you're typically going to be able to reduce any surprises you have. Now, the most common one we see as college students is actually car issues. Those tend to be the biggest surprises, right? You know you have to pay rent each month. You know you have a cell phone bill. That's not a surprise. You got to buy groceries. But when your car breaks down, now all of a sudden that's a large surprise, that you have to pay for. If like maybe a friend calls you this morning, is like, let's go out for dinner. You spend $10. That's a surprise. You didn't know you were going to spend $10, but it's $10. If your car doesn't work this morning, you take it in the shop and it's $800, that's a big difference. And so it reduces your surprise. It reduces the stress of that, which is, again, our main goal, is to make sure you get to choose where your money goes and you don't have this anxiety or stress about choosing your money. I want to say I try to use a lot of stories, but I think it was August. Actually, it was probably September, because I think I was in Utah. So September, when I travel, I tend to take my car in to get repairs. And it just so happened on that trip, I drive a big lifted Jeep Wrangler, and I took it in, and the guy was like, we know each other. He's like, Ben, your rear suspension, what did he call it? I'm horrible at cars. So I feel like he can just take my money if he wants. Like he could be like, oh, this thing is done and it costs $10,000. And I'm like, here's the money. I don't know what to do. But anyway, it was basically my rear axle was starting to break, which happens with Jeeps. I drive on dunes. I'm probably a little bit more reckless than your normal car. And I was at Utah and I got a text from him and he's like, it's going to be $3,400. And I was like, oh my, that's the price. I could buy a used car for that amount, maybe. And so thankfully I have the way I budget is I'm at Lake Michigan Credit, but most of you have this ability at your banks, is I have a checking account, but it's divided into categories. So when I get a direct deposit from my work, 5% goes into auto, 4% goes here, 10% goes here. And then the rest goes into the actual savings account or checking account. And so thankfully I've saved up enough that I didn't have to worry about the surprise that was happening there. So, so that's really helpful. When you have financial independence, when you've created a budget, you understand your expenses, and you are starting to save, you're not going to have that stress of a surprise. So yeah. So let's talk about the spending plan itself. And this is, we're going to spend some time on this because this is just a broad way of how you create a spending plan. I know kind of these virtual ones, it's a little bit harder than in classes. So I'm not going to specifically ask the question. I'll try to use some examples from me. But the big question, step number one, I'd have to ask you, and I'm going to give you 2 seconds to think about it. What is the one ticket item that you spend the most on? If you were to look at your finances and say, I spend more money per month on this item, what would it be? I'll give you just 2 seconds to think about it. So typically for college students, the most that you're going to spend on money, and this is average, is going to be your rent. That is typically going to be one of the biggest expenses you have. Certainly if you are the small percentage of students that's paying college out of pocket, then it's college, but that's a very small percentage of students. So typically per month, you're paying somewhere between $600 to $800 in rent. If you were to say, what's the next item, that tends to be the one that fluctuates a little bit more. Rent is what we call a fixed cost. So you have to pay $652 per month. If I were to say what's the next item, that typically tends to be a variable cost. So I'll give you 2 seconds to think about what you spend the most on after that. So for college students, that tends to be food. Groceries, food, eating out. It depends on what age you are, going to get drinks. That tends to be the second most. For some people, it's actually the highest for college students, depending on maybe how much you do go out to, go out with your friends on a Friday night or something. That can be a little bit higher each month. Now for adults, it actually is it's the opposite. Tends to be that food, if you have a family as an adult, tends to be what you spend the most on, groceries. And then rent or mortgages tends to be your second amount. As an example, I myself pay $700 and I think it's like $26 or something per month for my mortgage. And it was a 30-year mortgage plan. I think I have like 17 more years on it, but that's how much I pay per month. It's a fixed cost. The variable cost for groceries, I have 3 kids. I tend to spend somewhere between $850 to $1,200 on food per month. I also eat organic and like all organic dairy and meat, and I'm a little bit picky, I think, when it comes to that. I'm maybe a little bit more, I feel like we're from West Michigan, we're all a little bit foodies, so I'm kind of bougie when it comes to eating out and eating. So like, yeah, sure, I'll get some filet mignon and lobster when I'm at the grocery store, which is stupid, but I still want to get it. So it flip-flops, but you can think that throughout your life, those items are going to be the biggest ticket cost. As a college student, on average, the average college student spends about $280 a month in food. So this first step, now identifying your expenses is the more specific. Step 3 is the more specific. We just want you to kind of start tracking your spending, writing it down, getting a mental picture, an idea of where you're spending your money. Okay. If I were to ask everyone now, so I'm telling you, the USDA, the Food and Agricultural Department of Food and Agriculture, like literally says 280 for January of this last year, 2021, was the average that a student between the ages of 19 and 26 paid for food. So $280. If I were to ask you if you were higher than that or lower than that, you might not be able to say immediately, because you have to maybe think about that, unless you're tracking your spending. That's why it's important to start writing down those expenses. In fact, the only thing that I think I tend to give these presentations, and I say the only thing I'll ever challenge you on, like, what if you could take one thing away from this entire presentation, it would be start writing down your expenses. You don't even have to add them up. You don't have to calculate. You don't have to put in a spreadsheet, budget. Just form the habit of writing them down. Eventually, you will develop the other habits, but that's the really big, that's the first piece. So tracking your spending, knowing how much you have, can really start to help you budget some of that stuff. The next step 2 and step 3, really are the specific pieces. So for you guys, if you want to start budgeting, you're going to we'll start with step 1. You're going to either get an app on your phone, you're going to start using the memo piece on your phone, or you're going to actually get like basically it's a tracking book. There's different forms of it. It could be a checkbook. Nobody really uses those anymore, but any form of memo column where you can write down, it could be a journal, a pad, anything. Apparently some of us use checkbooks still, but I feel like that's me. You have to be over the age of like probably 40 to be able to use that. So, but get a pad of paper, get something and start writing down those expenses. The funny thing is, you will start to, after a month or 2 of that, it develops into a habit, and you will very quickly start to manage your finances differently. If you've never written down your spending, I just challenge you to do it for 30 days. Because if you do it, you'll be like, I cannot believe how much I spend on eating out. Or it's just amazing what you'll learn just from tracking your spending. So that's the first step. Get a pad of paper, get an app. There's a bunch of free apps on the phone. You can just search them. A lot of them will unfortunately have like in-app purchases, which actually do make things easier for budgeting. You don't need them. But I guess I wouldn't also be the first thing to say, like, if you start budgeting and it's going to save you $10, $15, $40, $80 a month, then pay that one-time $4.99 in-app purchase to be able to do that. So step 2 and step 3 are much more specific. So what you would do is you'd sit down with a paycheck stub. In fact, you'd sit down with about 4 paycheck stubs. 4 gives you a good average of what you make. Most college students do not get a very specific pay amount. You know, you're not salaried. You typically are hourly. And so you might find that one week you get paid $430, the next week you get $510, and then all of a sudden you get $410. And it's hard. I'll be the first one to say, if you have a varying income, it is really hard to budget. It gets harder. I know I specifically get what Grand Valley pays me every, 2 weeks or 15. I think they pay like twice a month. So I know exactly, and I can budget a little bit easier. So as a college student, try to save your last 4 paycheck stubs, put them somewhere. I mean, technically you should be saving up to 2 to 5 years worth. It depends on how complicated your taxes are. They say on average, save about 3 years of your income information. Okay. So find a place, a folder, put each paycheck stub in there in order so you can go back to that. In case you ever we're missing money or something's weird, you'd know that too. Find your income. And I'm going to jump ahead a couple slides because what you need to find is what's important for budgeting purposes is what's called your net income, okay, not your gross income. I know you all know this because you see your paycheck stubs and probably feel sick when you don't get paid the amount that you should be paid. At the top you see, hey, I made $450. And then below that, the net income says like $390. You're like, why am I'm not getting paid what I want? That's as a college student, there are a couple things that are taken out. So you've got the federal taxes that are going to be taken out. Those go to the US government, the federal US government, for things like everything from healthcare to education to military to, you can look at the budgets for the US government, but a tiny portion. So out of that 450, it might be a eighth of a penny goes to education, or a tenth of a penny goes to defense, or but it's paying for the government federal funding. Next, you have state taxes. It's the same thing, but at the state level. So the state resources. You may also have what's called local, it could be locale, it could be city, depends on where you're from, but there are also taxes sometimes that are taken out for that. So that if you work or live in the city of Grand Rapids, they take a small portion, and that's to pay for things like Grand Rapids Community College. I know you don't go there, but that's all of kind of our part in taking advantage. We pay 1 penny each paycheck to GRCC or whatever it is, to the zoo, to the museum, places like that. So that's taxes. That's how it works. You as a college student, you also have one other thing that's removed, and that's Social Security. Social Security is removed. How much or how likely it is that you'll see it, I have no idea. It was probably a great institution when it came out, mid-century. But as you all know, baby boomers happened, and the population just grew to a insurmountable. It's just the way that it was planned did not expect there to be a 500% rise in population. So not as many people will probably see the benefits of Social Security coming up in the next 10 to 30 years. But so that's what's taken out. When you graduate, there's going to be other things like insurance, life insurance, health insurance, dental, vision, hopefully retirement. You'll also contribute to retirement. So this gross income here is the total amount you receive. The net income is after all those deductions. Okay, so that's why you need to get your paycheck stub and review it. Most of us just get it, look at that final net income, and it's like, okay, great, I'm getting $380. But if you actually review it and see what percentage going towards what, it's kind of interesting. Next, since you've already tracked all your spending, you can sit down with your paycheck stubs and with all of your expenses that you've already written down and start to actually create a budget plan. Okay, I will show you in a few screens, and I'll actually send that. Lisa, we have a Excel worksheet that's already got all the math figured out and stuff, and I will send that to you after this. And so maybe you could post it somewhere or do something with it so that you guys can get that Excel sheet and then start doing the step 2 and step 3 together. But you'll basically just write down your income and then write down your expenses and start subtracting it for each. Obviously, your income, step 2, your income has to be greater than step 3. If you are spending more than you're bringing in, you're just going into debt. That's where we would suggest maybe coming to our credit counseling session, because you're probably doing that through a credit card, which is even worse. The penalties on that are pretty rough. So step 4 is really adjusting the numbers, taking a look at all of your paycheck stubs, averaging that out between at least 4, and then looking at all the expenses, subtracting that from your average monthly and figuring out what the final amount is. That's all you're doing. The problem is consistency. That is always the problem with budgeting and doing any of this financial independence. It's consistency. None of us have developed this habit. In fact, since we know as a college student, it's less than 10% budget. I would guess it to say that most of our parents didn't send us to a budgeting class, a financial independence class, or maybe didn't talk to us about this. In fact, to tell you the truth, just because I work in financial aid, some of your parents probably have pretty bad spending habits too. So, so you're working, from a step behind possibly, and that's again why we want to get this information into your laps. We talk about the reason again why you're doing this, and this SMART goals. Yes, we put financial in the middle of it, but it's really it's a theory. It's called SMART goal theory or SMART theory. Basically, you need to have a specific goal in mind that's obtainable, realistic, time that you can measure it, and that it ends by a certain date. So as an example of this, I will use I'll use myself. So in a couple months or whatever couple months, I'll be in Jamaica. I want to have a good Jamaica body. Like, I'm going to be taking Instagram pictures. Like, I need to look good for Jamaica. So I could create a SMART goal for weight loss, right? Where it's a specific, measurable, achievable. I can't just say to myself, I want to look good for Jamaica, done. The goal's not specific. I mean, yeah, but like, what am I doing to do that? I guess there is a time limit to it because I know I have Jamaica, but I'm not going to be motivated to do anything because is it achievable? What's the specifics of it? What am I doing for it? And so a more SMART goal in that will be specifics. I want to be at this weight before this time. Or I want to look like this celebrity before this, or whatever. I don't, that's just a stupid rule, but it's more specific. It's measurable if I go by weight. Not that that's the best way to do health, honestly. You should always just feel and be healthier than necessarily look at. That's a kind of a dumb measurement, but is it achievable? Yes. If I start setting out goals, I need to work out an hour a day or whatever it is. I need to run, I need to get up to running 10 miles on a weekend, and so kind of doing that pre-marathon training. That's another SMART goal. I'm going to run a marathon in 4 months. So what are those specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals? For finances, I would encourage you to make one small goal. I talked to a girl a couple weeks ago, and her goal was to not borrow any loan, which is for college, which is a great goal. I don't know if this achievable, realistic piece of it is hard, when almost, in her FAFSA income bracket, It's like 98% of people borrow loans. She was a low income student. It is just part of the investment sometimes. And it's not a bad investment. If I have to borrow a loan, I would rather borrow it for college as an investment than say a car that's going to depreciate. You know, college will pay you back. You will make, for going to college, you will, in your lifetime, you will make more money than you had to pay for college. It's just the problem is you have to pay for college like up front, right? The 4 years here, and then over your 52 years of working. I think the difference is almost 1.3 million in benefits and salary if you look at US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yes. So college is good. Her goal, not, maybe not achievable and realistic. So if you start small, maybe your goal right now, I'm going to go back a slide. Maybe your goal right now is to just track your spending. That's it. Like I said, it's the one thing I encourage you to do, from this thing is my goal is I will write down every expense I have for 1 week. It's time bound, it's specific, if you've done it, and it's achievable. You can write down your expenses. And then the next week, say, I'm going to write down all my expenses for 1 more week. And you just keep doing that. That's a very realistic, smart financial goal to have. So again, I'll probably keep going back to that writing down because I think more than anything, I can't do all of your budgets individually right now, but I could say the one thing I encourage you to do is write that down. So we talked about gross income versus net. Real quick, we'll talk about fixed expenses versus variable or flexible expenses. Obviously, fixed is going to be things that it's much easier to budget with because they don't change. Rent will be $685 per month. Utilities, that's variable or flexible. Now it doesn't vary probably too much. Like 1 month you spend $32 in electricity, the next month you spend $42 because you're running something a little bit more. Next month so there's not a lot of variance to it, but there is some. Let me just throw on this chat. So, variable expenses can change a lot. Let's say clothes. So we're getting to the spring season. Some of you are going on vacation. You're going to Florida. You want to buy some swimwear or sandals or something like that. You don't have to buy swimwear in December. You might do it because there's sales, but you don't have to. So that's very variable, right? Your monthly car insurance doesn't change unless you get in an accident and it goes up or something like that, or you turn 25 and it goes down. That's more of a fixed expense. A variable or flexible expense would be how much you eat out. So, this week for whatever, you went out to eat all the time. Next week you go get groceries, you can see that big difference because eating out is very expensive actually. So as you're thinking about that step 3 and writing down your expenses versus your income, step 2, that's just important to kind of categorize those to understand that stuff. Okay, needs and wants. I did want to talk about this real quick because if you talk to financial gurus, the big one in West Michigan, for whatever reason, I think because he has a conference here, so I always see the signs, but it's Dave Ramsey's. Maybe I think he has family here in this area or something, so that maybe, I don't know. But there's a ton of them. There's a ton of financial celebrities is what we call them, financial. And what they are is they're basically telling people, touting their philosophy on finances. A lot of them will have this basic understanding, like food, clothing, shelter, and like near needs, like health needs. So if I'm celiac, I need specific, food. If I have diabetes, I need specific medication. Like that's really what we're talking about, near needs. They will say that's how you budget. You think about all your own needs, and then everything else you could probably get rid of. In fact, you probably should. So just do your needs for a month, save up a bunch of money, and then you'll start to, that tends to be the philosophy. I guess me being realistic, working with college students, working with myself, knowing myself, I think the one thing I would add to this, and maybe some of them would say it's in this health category, is, especially with COVID and what we've seen, is mental health category. So yeah, food, clothing, shelter, but if books for you reading every night helps you to maintain some sanity as you attend, balance your schedule with class, with work, with all the other things, then purchase the book. Like go to the library. Sure, you can save money doing some of those things, but there are some things that you might have to spend or budget for that you wouldn't necessarily think are this food, clothing, shelter. A good example for me, I mentioned it before, is traveling right now, but before that was concerts. I went to a lot of concerts. I think in 2019, so before COVID, I saw 72 shows. So that was my thing. I go to all these festivals, like that's a big thing. And for my mental health, that's what I needed to do. I made enough money where I knew I could budget, and yeah, I could cut it out, but I would cut out other things before that. I would cut out fast food. I would cut out, honestly, I have to drive to Grand Valley. I'd just start riding the bus. Like for me, concerts was that important. And so I think everybody has that one other thing that they need to put into the need category to maintain that kind of like mental health piece, especially now with COVID. So too many expenses. We already talked about this, but if your expenses are higher than your income, you do need to adjust, right? You can't be giving out more. You can't pay more out than you actually receive in terms of income. So, okay. So the budget form, and this is a horrible picture because it's tiny, but you can kind of see here the way we track it as an Excel sheet. It's free. Sure, you can pay that in-app purchase. In fact, you can get programs through some of the tax programs to be able to budget this. But basically for us, we just have a couple different categories here, everything from, housing and rent to school to grocery and utility purchases. You just write down whatever your expenses are. You can add columns to it. It'll track what your expenses are versus whatever you put in the income and kind of give you an idea. So it's a very basic, simple budgeting tool, but Excel has allowed you to do that because, you can put in, if you know anything about Excel, you can put in like this column minus this column divided by, and get these very quick numbers. And so I will send this to you, and then hopefully we can get it to students somehow, but it's a very helpful tool to be able to start budgeting with.
I put it in the chat, Ben, that we'll go ahead and send that with follow-up email to all the participants today.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and so if you did sign up for one of our MoneySmart Laker budget appointments, this is what we'd go through. We just go through it with you. So you would generally want to provide us a couple paycheck stubs, and then at least for a week beforehand, we ask, can you write down your expenses so we can get some ideas of, what you're spending. Okay, so next I'm gonna just kind of give you an idea of what it's like, and that's kind of the rest of my slides. This will take about 10 minutes. So if you want to grab out your phone, or you can write it down on a piece of paper or a calculator, we're gonna just go through it. You don't have to interact with it other than doing the numbers. So essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through all these expenses here, base it on your income, and see how much you spend and what items are more important to you. So we'll start with the income itself. If you know, and I will mention, I guess side note, some of you may be going to med school and then you'll get like, this will be like starting $10,000 per month. Like, yes, there are the exceptions where you're earning a lot more, but we're using US Bureau of Labor Statistics for someone who's like just out of college a couple years. Okay, so this income can be very different, but if we're just using that 25-year-old kind of average income, if you graduate from Grand Valley as a bachelor, you'll typically be earning now adjusted gross income this much, net income this much. So essentially this, I don't want to say it's a game, this activity is pop this into your calculator and then we'll start subtracting things from it to see what you end up with. And it's not I'm not trying to trick anyone, it's not a test. You can choose a lot of the expensive options and you'll still have money at the end, okay? Just as a FYI. So if you think you're done with, you're not gonna go on to any graduate school or anything, just pop 3140 in your calculator. If you think you're going on to grad school, okay, then pop 3690. So 3140 or 3690. Now, if you borrow loans, again, there's the fixed cost. 6 months after you graduate, you will have to start paying back that loan. For 4 years, our average, now this is actually Grand Valley's average right here, the 26, oh, I went back. This 26,912 is Grand Valley's specific average. I think the United States is around 28,000 something. So surprisingly, Grand Valley is a little less than the national average. But if you just got your bachelor's degree, just subtract 300 from that 3,100 number. If you went on to get a graduate degree, subtract 750. Some of these are, you know, I said, if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to earn a lot more, but you'll have a ton more in debt. In fact, the average doctor has about $360,000 in debt. So they're paying like $2,700 per month, quite a bit. Okay. So subtract those numbers, 300 and 750 from your costs. Okay. Next is housing. Okay. Now, some of these averages, we used Grand Valley averages from what our college students on average are spending. Some are also, this one's the Housing Authority, I think. So we try to give you averages, right? This is increasing, in fact. You know, the question is, what do you want to do right after college? Again, assume this is about 2 years after college. You're making that income, you're repaying your, do you want to live with roommates still? Do you want your own, you know, house? And this isn't like a house in East Grand Rapids. We're talking about a house still on the west side of Grand Rapids. Like you're surrounded by college students. You just have your own house. Okay. This isn't like a 6-bedroom by yourself or something. And same with house. You can see how expensive housing gets. Now, this will change where you live. You know, I know you all know that concept, but if you go to, like, my favorite Seattle or city to visit is Seattle. These are going to like almost double in Seattle. It's very expensive out there right now. My friend who lives out there in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. So it's just 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It's tiny. It's like 900 and something square feet or 1,100 square feet. He ends up paying like $1,400 a month for that in the city. So these will change, but from whatever number, subtract whatever you think you get. And I'll move on to the next one, which is utilities. So utilities, depending on what you chose. Okay, so I'm going to go back real quick. I'm just going to allow you to see whether you chose frugal, moderate, or expensive. So depending on what you chose, remember that. And then this is your averages utilities. Okay. So subtract that. Okay. Transportation. This is kind of one of those things, you know, are you going to keep your current car that you've kind of paid off or almost paid off? I mean, in here we suggest you paid it off already, but you know, that kind of like, you know, 2006 Malibu or something. Or are you going to buy kind of a more brand new car, but not really brand new, you know, like that, I don't know, 2016 Toyota Corolla or something, or Camry, you know, that would be the used car piece. If you want a brand new car, or apparently you want a Jeep because you'll be paying that in repair costs. But if you want something like that, then, you know, you're going to be paying a lot more. I think people don't realize, based on insurance and gas, as a 22, 23-year-old, how much you'll actually pay. It's quite a bit. Generally, you actually pay more in insurance and gas than you do on the car loan. So yeah, 2000, or maybe this is even like a 1987 like Oldsmobile Sierra. That was my first car. It was horrible. It's like the size of a cruise boat, and it didn't have power steering. So that was when I was in my best shape. My arms looked beefy, but you know, most people I think want that kind of used car. As a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, I don't think your goal should be like getting a new Jaguar F-Type or something. Don't set that as a goal. Okay, so keep subtracting these numbers. Again, this is the total monthly cost. Total monthly cost is what you'll subtract from your amount. Obviously, you can save a lot more on groceries. Kind of depends on what you're spending. Like I said, the average college student is spending about $280, so somewhere kind of in between this. These are just some examples. You might go to Aldi and Meijer a couple times. Obviously, if you're going to like a specialty store, you're gonna like a Trader Joe's, you pay more. Okay, so subtract that amount. And I will real quick, just for those of you, once I get to entertainment, I'll go back some of the slides and I'll give you like 10 seconds to review each slide if there's something you need to subtract on it. Now, this is an interesting one. It is a variable cost. You will not pay this per month. I myself probably, I always give this presentation and I always think, I know I'm the budget guy, but I feel like there's areas that I need to budget less on because I feel like I'm a little bougie sometimes when I see this slide. I'm probably here, or maybe even more, but only once every like 3 months. You know, like I will go to the outlet malls maybe twice a year and drop like $700 or something. And that's like my outfits forever, I feel like. And I have kids, so it's a lot more expensive that way too. So we're just trying to break it up into like averages. Do you really care about what shoes you're wearing? Or are you like, well, I need something that's okay? Or are you like, dude, I hate spending money on clothes. I would rather just wear a pillowcase. And that's this one, that's this person, so. Okay. So I'm not giving you the choice. You either have to subtract $50 or $70 for internet, because let's be honest, all of you will have internet. In fact, all of you will have a cell phone. I can guarantee that. So you can either subtract 100 or 120 for that unlimited data. In fact, some of you will continue to want to buy the brand newest phone. And so a lot of times those are put into the month cost. And so you might even be spending more than 120 per month, in fact. This is where I'll kind of give you more of the choice. I myself have a couple, so I have like, what do I have? Actually it's gross. I have Disney, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and HBO. So I have kind of a lot, I guess, when you think about that. So I actually spend probably like, I don't know, $100 a month on services, which again, I feel like when I give this presentation every time, I'm like, I should cut something out. But you know, those plans don't always include sports or other things like that. So you know, pick which one. I feel like most of you will probably have something, even if that's just Netflix and Hulu or Amazon Prime or something else. But entertainment. So I'm going to give you my ideas of the categories of this. Frugal entertainment is you maybe go out once a week. Your friends really have to drag you out, right? Like you're just kind of a loner, which is great. Like I love that, you know, but you don't really want to go out much. Maybe when you go to work, you buy some fast food every once in a while, or maybe you go out to the movie by yourself. Like this type of person is okay going out with a movie to themselves. Okay, by themselves. This type of person is like, I think the average college student. You want to go out a couple times a week with your friends. You don't want to spend a ton of money, but you do like to go out, right? Whereas this expensive person is like, no, I am going out. Like you for sure, every Friday, Saturday night, this person as a college student is out spending money. Which again, I feel like I am in that category. So too many, I should redo my budgets. But, you know, you like to go to concerts every week if they were still going on, things like that. I know COVID has changed all of this because basically we could X this out. We have no lives. But think about it in, again, 2, 3, 4 years. And then personal care costs, again, kind of this idea is like, this is the majority of like 18-year-old boys is this category. Just joking, but not. You know, most of you guys who will maybe get a haircut, you know, spend on a salon, For women, maybe you get your nails done, maybe you do things like that. Like that's going to be in this 90s cost. Maybe if you really care about beauty products and you buy the best and you want all those, you're spending more. For a handful of months, this was like 2 years ago, we started this presentation a couple years ago. I dated a girl and we figured out how much she spent per month, and it was $540 per month on which, you know, that when you're getting like Botox and other stuff, she got microblading, which I didn't even know about before her. I felt so dumb, but you know, that kind of stuff. Then you just spend a lot. So that was her average. So anyway, I'm gonna jump back. That's it for costs. I'm gonna go through this real quickly. So I'll just spend about 10 seconds on each. You need to subtract something if you missed it. But you should have a number at the end. And more than likely, again, this wasn't like a trick kind of to trick you or anything. You're gonna have money. Most people have money. If you don't, then you and I probably have to look at our budgets together, because I feel like I'm probably in that category. But you should have money. The thing is, when I talked about income and net income, I was not including a retirement plan in that. I was not talking about long-term care insurance. So you might actually make anywhere from $100 to $400 less than what I even put on there, because you're doing things. And this doesn't include that summer trip that you have with your friends, or a spring break trip. It doesn't include, you know, other stuff that you will spend. And so it's not a trick, but it's also to mention that you will be on a budget. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful, just going through that real quick. Again, I'm going to have that Excel sheet budget list. Give that to Lisa. That way you guys can look at that as well and start to begin those steps at forming your, you know, financial independence through budgeting. The main thing you have to think about is right now, the only thing you should be thinking about, or you should be focusing on, is writing down your expenses every single day, every single week. If you go out at night, let's say it's a Friday and you have some drinks with friends, you might not write it down. You might not remember to write it down. Hopefully you do, but depending on your activities, the next morning, write those down. Look online. You can always go online to your debit card and, you know, then write down your expenses from that. Just form that habit. Plus you might wake up and be like, wait, I spent $200, and then you realize you bought all your friends around, and then you'll never do that again. So it helps with a lot of things. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Certainly we have our MoneySmart Laker appointments that you can sign up for on our website, on the financial aid website. So we'd love, if you have more questions, to be able to do that as well.
And speaking of questions, Ben, we do have one in the chat.
Yeah, I did see that.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of years post-graduation and you're applying for a mortgage loan. Is it better to take the money you have saved in the bank and pay off your student loan, or better to keep the student loan and show that you have money in your bank?
So anytime you're doing anything with loans, car loan, house meaning like mortgage loan, maybe a personal loan, college loans, those are going to tend to be the ones that you see. You should always figure out the percentages. It's going to be based on the amount that you're borrowing and the percentages. So in terms of a mortgage, it looks very different than college loan, because a mortgage loan might be $150,000 right away and over 30 years. So a long time, but it's a really good investment. A college loan, typical repayment plan is 10 to 15 years is what you're doing. And it's a 6%, you know, a 5%. House loan might be 3%. So the longer you have the loan for, a lot of times the lower the percentage. Although that's not always the case. Car loans right now are like 2.5%, 3% if you get an actual car loan, not leasing, talking about car loans. But there's no investment in that, except other than it can take you to work. And so it really depends on the type of loan that you have. If you were to talk to some of those financial gurus or celebrities, they would say get out of all debt before you add more debt. That's the common theme right now. That has not always been the case. I feel like that's been the last 10 to 20 years that there's been this like push to get out of debt. So they would say, again, basic needs. They would say, live in your car until you pay off your student loans. And, some people are to the extreme. I guess I'm not one of those people. I would say, do what feels like you want in some ways. Don't buy things, don't do things in immediacy. I'm kind of a yes person, which is a bad quality when it comes to budgeting. Like I just, literally, if somebody asked me to go to like Bermuda this weekend, I'd be like, yep, what's the ticket? $800? Sure, I'll go. Like I have that problem. Don't be that person, and instead think about your decision or choices, but you also have to be able to live your life, like enjoy your life. So if that's buying a house that you found that you like, and now you have this mortgage and college loan, I would say that's my advice. It wouldn't be everybody's. So.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm looking at the time now. So we'll finish up here. And the Career Center team is here for all of you. We have several resources for students to connect with us. The virtual career lab hosted in Blackboard, handshake scheduling remote Zoom and phone appointments, as well as having your resume reviewed simply by emailing it over to careers@gvsu.edu. And I put in the chat your last chance to go ahead and sign in to win one of those tech prizes by checking in on the Google form by clicking on that link. We also have a couple upcoming sessions left in the Work Like a Laker conference, which is leading up to the virtual career fair on the 18th. So take a look, visit the website and see if any of those interest you, and please RSVP for those events. But mostly that virtual career fair. Really, this is your opportunity to get in front of employers, to build that network, and it doesn't matter which level you're at, freshman, senior, adult learner. We have employers that want to meet you and speak to you. So please register for the March 18th virtual career fair. Like I said, last chance to enter in by filling out that Google form. And I just want to thank our prize sponsor this year has been Consolidated Electrical Distributors Incorporated. And I want to thank Ben for his partnership with the Career Center to provide this information to all of you. Please utilize MoneySmart Lakers and the Career Center. These are your resources for your ultimate return on your investment. We're here to help you, support you all throughout your journey. So we'll get that information to you via email and a follow-up. And if you have any questions, I've also included Ben's contact information in the chat, as well as the link to the MoneySmart Lakers. So I'll go ahead and put that in right now, once again, for those of you who may have joined late. So you could go ahead and bookmark that information. But thank you all very much for attending this afternoon.
Yeah,
it has been recorded, so hopefully you will see that on the Career Center website in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.